I think the campaign and the uptick you've seen is intentional, but it is really due to the circumstances and the fact that we've got challenges in front of us that we have not had in years.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
I saw last week that the Next Generation Carriers podcast, that's a podcast by letter carriers, one of whom is in Florida and the other in Massachusetts, I think. The one in Massachusetts, I think, is the president of his local branch, I think he said. Next Generation Carriers had Brian Renfroe on for a 2.5-hour conversation. I know that we've collected a lot of letter carrier listeners over the last year or so I figured y'all would be interested in knowing about that if you didn't already. And I pulled a couple of things that are kind of big picture folks that I think that people in the audience might be curious about. And then for the for the rest of the stuff, they got pretty in the weeds about some questions that I'm sure is valuable to letter carriers, but maybe kind of less so for other people. But on big picture things, starting with the contract itself, there was just a mention in a question of concessions in the contract, and Renfroe was very, very adamant that there were no concessions in the contract. Here is that back and forth.
Are we going to sacrifice the 1260 or any of those, or is that locked in? Are we stuck with these concessions?
Well, I would not call them concessions. I'd be curious what you thought were concessions first.
Concession? What my thing is?
Yeah, what part of the agreement do you view as a concession compared to what we have now?
The labor movement's built around 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, and 8 hours of sleep, and what you will. If we're going to allow people to work over 12 hours, say you have two people working over 12 hours, that's 8 hours right there. That's a third worker. That is a concession. We should be advancing the labor movement. We should be creating a firm 10-hour limit. If someone wants overtime at 10 hours, they should be able to work at 10 hours and clock out. So it is a concession. And I'm not the only one that's saying it's a concession. That's one of the hottest topics right now is the 1260. We should not have to volunteer to make poverty wages. And that's a fact. Our wages have declined. In 2006, the starting pay for a PTF was like $20 an hour. So it is a concession. We don't know what USPS's first offer was 2 years ago, but a lot of people want to know is not just the wage stuff, but people want to know, is everything back on the table, and what is not on the table, and what are we as NALC keeping?
Okay, well, first off, let's be clear about what was in the chain of agreement, because it sounds like there's some misunderstanding. The only changes to maximum work hours, the only changes are this. Letter carriers who right now are told they have to work beyond maximum work hours would no longer have to do that. They would have contractual protection against discipline for clocking out and going home, whatever instruction they're given. That's one change. The second change is those that are on the overtime desired list, if they volunteer, they could work beyond those hours. That's the only change to maximum work hours. Oh, there is one more in the TA. That if they volunteered to work over or worked over for any reason, they would be paid a new pay rate of 2.5 times pay. That's the only change. There's no change to the overtime desired list options in terms of work assignment, or I don't want to be on the list. There's no change to Article A, Section 5F about what the normal hours are, 8 hours, normally no more than 10. None of that changes. So the only piece that I look at here is this. One of the major problems we have around the country in areas that end up, and mostly it happens in places that have staffing issues, obviously, is continuous violations of what Arbitrator Mittenthal said 37 years ago. And that is that the work hour limitations in Article 8 are absolute. And then we've had 36 years of arbitration decisions and agreements made about why it's not absolute. And letter carriers are constantly forced to work past the maximum work hours. This is an agreement that was made to stop that and put the power in the hands of the letter carrier. It does not change anyone that's not on the overtime desired list. It doesn't change those who are on the work assignment to work past 10. It doesn't change the impact, as I said, of Article 8, Section 5.
So there you go. He said that not a concession. So they also talked later about reduced office time. That was one of the concessions that some folks had identified, that they felt like the tentative agreement reduced office time, where carriers could be in the office kind of doing some of the organizational work. And Renfroe was also adamant that that was not a concession, saying that it just modifies the way that it's calculated. And so presumably Renfroe's argument would be that this means that the office time could potentially be expanded rather than reduced. And, so I don't know. You'll have to make of that what you will. But that was his argument. He doesn't believe there are any concessions. There was also a question about the timeline, right? And that's been a huge, that's just been such a huge topic of conversation. And no doubt it's frustrating, the negotiations have been going on now for 2 years. And so the question was put to him, why didn't we go to arbitration in summer of 2023? And this is how he responded.
Arbitration in the summer of 2023.
Yeah, because we were, making progress in negotiation. We made progress in negotiations for months. And, ultimately, you guys have probably all heard me say this. When we came to the point of tentative agreement, we did that because I did not think we would do better in interest arbitration, and I still don't think we'll do better. Just thinking realistically, particularly with everything that's going on now, all the uncertainty. And when I say do better, I'm not talking about any one specific, part of the agreement. There's ways to, look at the economics and increase something here and maybe do something differently over here. I'm speaking just generally. Arbitration after a rejected ratification vote, however, is a different animal. So in some ways, the challenge of the uncertain world that we live in now, it kind of remains to be seen that how that balances out with the idea that the tentative agreement, was rejected, and letting the arbitrator know that this is, very clearly, here's hard evidence of the members' expectation. So, it was that. It would, and look, no different in 2019, 2020, no different in 2016 into 2017, or all the way back to the arbitration process in 11 and 12. As long as we thought we were making progress, we kept negotiating, and eventually, I made that decision, and the members are always right, though. That's something that's true in the history of our union. And whatever the outcome is here,
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
And so, I don't think he really answered the question, in my opinion. The question... the question was, the words were, why don't we go to arbitration sooner? But then he said, but the way that he responded was like, well, going to arbitration after you get a contract rejection gives you more leverage in arbitration. It's like, that's true. And it is true that you didn't have a contract rejection in summer of 2023. But like the actual argument would have been that you would have had a contract rejection by summer of 2023, right? And so that was frustrating to hear, because the question was obviously why were negotiations so slow? Why are we only at this stage? It's not why didn't we skip a TA and contract vote and go straight to arbitration in 2023? That's not what the question was, and that was frankly pretty frustrating.
Yeah, people just want to know what took so long.
Yeah. Exactly. So then there was a question about, the media, and this is something that we've noticed as, folks who are kind of covering some of this, is that there has just been a lot more from the union, a lot more communication from the union about what is happening at the bargaining table. And so they asked him about that increase in, engagement online and, and from him as the president.
So there's a lot of chatter with people talking about how in the past month or so, the NALC has really stepped up its game with the Fight Like Hell rally, the Facebook posts, and there's been a question of why wasn't that happening all along? Or is this something that's happening in the background that people don't know and now there's more of a push? I think a lot of guys wanted to see more of that social output on social media from the NALC.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I guess let me take it in a couple pieces. First, the campaign that we branded Fight Like Hell, we had an official kickoff. I don't know, what was that? Not this past week, the week before, was in part developed because we knew this type of battle would come. We did not, necessarily know when. It was sort of undefined. But we knew under this administration and with the current makeup of Congress, and maybe even more so, just if you notice, you hadn't heard a peep from a Republican in Congress about this whole potential executive order. That's because they are all scared to death of the president and the administration. So there's an interesting dynamic there. Anyway, we knew that was coming. So that was a big part of, the Fight Like Hell campaign. In terms of this social media stuff surrounding that and otherwise, look, we constantly are working to do the very best we can on social media. I will tell you the truth. We have a whole building full of employees in Washington, D.C. We have great people that work doing digital and all that sort of stuff. And, it's a place where we push and push and push. And I do think it's gotten better. It's gotten better from my perspective, but I think it's also out of necessity. You notice it's probably been more aggressive. It's probably been a little more defiant. And that's just simply because there are challenges out there that we face. But I think we always have to try to get better. We are going to really get our podcast back up and going. Probably going to record an episode tomorrow. And then, just keep doing, because what we do on social media, of course, a huge part of it is information for the members, but also a huge part of it is, that's an increasing piece. That's a place of influence on Capitol Hill with staffers from members of Congress, some more than others, but that there's also sort of a strategy behind it in terms of using it as an effective tool as part of, advocacy efforts. So I think the campaign and, maybe the uptick you've seen is intentional, but it is really due to the circumstances and the fact that we've got challenges in front of us that we have not had in years. So it requires a
So there you go. That was his answer to why they've been increasing the engagement about the contract campaign. And finally, I wanted to give you his answer to a question about caucuses and groups that are, pushing the union in one way or another, that I thought was interesting. And then, again, I'll encourage folks if they want to hear more. Like I said, it was a 2.5 hour podcast, so you can find it on Next Generation Carriers on YouTube and presumably wherever you get your podcast, but YouTube is where I saw it. So here's his answer to a question about caucuses.
So, Brian, some branch presidents have come out in their newsletters as of recently discussing these different caucuses going on and saying that they're divisive and disruptive to the union, going as far as to almost call them as trying to break the union. How do you feel about that? And do some of these things that these groups do that attract attention, are you ever willing to meet with them and figure out what the NALC could do to attract attention and affect members the way that they're able to reach out to them and sit across the table and see things that they're working towards or ideas they have?
Look, I don't to me, we're all letter carriers and we're all the NALC. I don't see or really view our union as, having, caucuses or groups that are split one away from the other. I mean, I will talk to any member of the union about anything. Now there's only 24 hours in a day, but the fact that someone, has some sort of association with any individual or group, that's not important to me. I don't make any decisions based on any of that politically. I think if you look at, I've got people that are friends that I've worked with for a long time that are involved in different things, that they feel like is in the best interest of, I presume they feel like is in the best interest of the union. So, I think there's 280 something thousand for us. And I think there's room for every single one that wants to be involved. There's room for every single one that wants to, have some influence or have a say. We are the most democratic, little d, democratic union in America. And the discussions that, take place around the country, whether that's in the form of, my preference obviously would be for that kind of stuff to happen at branch meetings and within the constitutional structure of the union. I do think there is potential harm in, creating different caucuses if they do result in division. But I can tell you from my perspective, that division is not something that I hold that affects, what we as a union do. The stuff that I have control over.
So there you go. Like I said, if you want to see the rest of that interview, you can go to Next Generation Carriers. It's good of Renfroe to be willing to take these questions from folks. And those are some of the bigger picture things. I thought that was generally a good, generally a good answer on the caucuses thing. He stayed away from some of the more inflammatory rhetoric that it sounds like some branch presidents have been engaging in. I think that the existence of caucuses is evidence of, a vibrant kind of small d democratic ethos within a union, and is not something that's bad or necessarily divisive. And so I thought that answer was I thought that it was good that he stayed away from some of the more inflammatory rhetoric there.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.
Which side are you on?